not keep letting people in as they enter in. So hi, everybody. Thank you again for joining. Let me go ahead and mute everybody for now. So thanks for joining our Lunch and Learn Technology, Gaming, and our ever-shifting new normal. This is my first virtual Lunch and Learn, so please bear with me as I run into any issues. I appreciate it and all of your patience and apologize in advance. I think I know most of you guys on this call, but my name is Olga Marable. I'm the Director of Admissions and Outreach at Fusion Academy Rockville. And what you guys are joining today is extremely special. It is a total Hafkin palooza, what we are calling it. Nancy, Jacob, and Josh are all family. Thank you for joining. I know their daughter Bridget is on too. So hi, Bridget. I think it's really extraordinary that you guys were able to team up and speak on this topic because you all have such different perspectives on how you relate to this. So I'm really interested to hear from you. And I know this has been a topic a lot of people are bringing up in today's society with our ever-shifting pandemic situation for adolescents. A little bit about Fusion, just so you guys know, we are a private school 6th through 12th grade. We are we provide one-to-one academics for our students, and with the pandemic, nothing has changed other than the fact that the student and the teacher aren't in class one-on-one, they're just doing classes virtually. We're continuing to provide that as a service for families, whether it's for tutoring for now or even this summer, enrolling new students for now, summer or fall, or even our summer camp program where we're offering small group summer camps for middle school and high school students. So I can definitely provide more information if anybody is interested in that at a later time. Some ground rules, expectations, how we're gonna set this all up. I'm going to keep everybody muted during the presentation, except for the speakers, since we obviously wanna hear them. If you guys can rename yourselves, I would really appreciate that. If you change your name to your first and last name, just so I can know who's on the call when we get to Q&A, I can know how to address you by your appropriate name. Also, we have decided to leave the chat feature open and enabled. So feel free to network throughout the chat if you want to provide your business as a resource. If you have any information that you want to share, please feel free to share that in the chat throughout the presentation. If you have a private conversation, I do ask that you keep that through a private chat. You can select an individual person's name if you have a specific question for them. And we will open Q&A at the end. So at the end, if you have a question, I will open it up and you can ping that you have a question, and then I will let you guys know who's in order to ask a question. And we can go through that at the end too. And like I said, this is being recorded. So I'll try not to embarrass myself because everyone's going to get this at the end. And even those who were not able to attend today will get a copy. Okay, well, without further ado, Hafkin Palooza, you guys take it away.
Okay, we want to unmute.
Unmute. Hey, hi everybody. So yeah, thank you guys for being here. This is the first time I've done one of these, and I'm getting to do it with my mother, and I'm getting to do it with my brother, and I'm super excited. Thank you guys so much for being here. I think one of the things that I want to talk about and cover is the fact that we've never known how to do this right. Okay, so as we're trying to figure it out, the phrase that Josh uses all the time is we are building this airplane while it is in flight. Technology is more serious, gaming is more serious, you know, more of our lives are spent on screens, and we're really just trying to figure out what that new normal looks like. So our goal today is to help you guys understand the way a teenager's mind works, some tips and techniques for parents and clinicians, hopefully clinicians. Josh is going to talk to you about the game gym and how the game gym is really on the forefront of what this looks like. Mom's going to talk to you about helping your kids to find their stopping point. And generally, we're just trying to create a dialogue where we're going to start out, and we really hope that you guys have questions. So if you have any questions, write them down, take notes, something like that. So we're going to have a good 40 minutes or so to go over questions at the end. Does that make sense, everybody?
Yes.
Right. So let's get on to introductions. Hand it over to Mom, Nancy.
Hello, everybody. I'm Nancy Hafkin. I'm a psychologist here in Montgomery County. Been here a long time, raised my sons here. And I work with adults in individual, couple, and group psychotherapy. I also do a great deal of parent education. I feel like parent education is really near and dear to my heart. I actually put myself through school doing parent education. So I see that as sort of a critical piece of what I do. I also spend a lot of time with people who have ADHD in their family, either themselves, their spouses, their kids, and it's an important interest of mine. Okay, over.
Hi, I'm Jacob. I'm a therapist in private practice. I work exclusively with boys and young men, ADHD, learning differences, anger management, anxiety, depression. A lot of what I do revolves around helping parents to understand the way their kid's brain works, helping parents to understand how to respond to issues. Every single parent I've worked with at some point has heard me say the phrase, "The problem is not the problem is how we respond to the problem," which is a quote directly from Captain Jack Sparrow. But really what I'm helping families and parents and kids try to figure out is life is a process of messing up and recovering. And in my practice, that's really what I spend a lot of time doing. I play outside with kids. I bring my dog to work every day, and we deal with these minor issues before they become major issues, or help young men recover from major issues and turn them back into a minor issue.
Hey everybody, my name is Josh Hafkin. I'm the only member of my family that is not a mental health professional, but I'm a coach, and I feel like when you're a coach, you got to do a lot of, helping people with all kinds of aspects of their life. I grew up an athlete and swam for 20, 23 years of my life. So that was a huge part of things. Afterwards, I got into video game marketing and helped traditional video game companies like Bethesda Softworks, and then other companies like Geico, Dove Soap, and Jägermeister, and others enter the gaming world and do it in a way that was healthy and made the brand look good. So I was able to kind of put those two things together: my love of sports, my love of coaching, and also this world of video games. And we saw this need for coaches in this world of video games. And so we started the Game Gym, and now we have this wonderful facility in Rockville, and we teach lessons, we do classes, and our whole goal is to make gaming more positive by applying structure and coaching, and hopefully alleviate some pain points for kids and parents. So I'm going to give it back to Jake, who's going to talk about the next phase.
Okay, so as I said earlier, we're trying to figure out what our new framework of screen time looks like. I remember when I was growing up, I think that my generation was probably the last generation, unless you live out in the country, where it was go play until the streetlights come on. I think in a lot of ways, life is really different, and a lot of the parents that I work with are having a really hard time figuring out what screen time should look like. This is even more exacerbated due to COVID. Now all of our lives are on screen. One of the things that I heard when I started out in this field 10-ish years ago was that, well, your online friends aren't real friends. And now we've got parents doing Zoom happy hours and, spending all their time talking to friends. And one of the things that I'm hearing parents realize is that, oh my goodness, these relationships are real relationships. I think we need to start designing a new framework. We need to start looking at the way that our kids are interacting with screens, less as we need to get them off screens immediately, and more we need to pay attention to what our kids are doing on screens, why they are doing it, and how to help them structure it. A little bit later, I'm going to talk about brain development, but really what I want to start out with is conversation. We need to be talking to our kids. If we're just saying, get off the screen, you're spending too much time on the screen, those video games are stupid. In the School of Social Work, there's the term, meet your client where he's at. And I really recommend to parents to start out, meet your kid with where they're at. figure out what they like about Fortnite, figure out what they like about Super Smash Brothers, figure out what their relationships with these friends look like. I hear you keep on saying the name Michael. Who is Michael? Tell me about Michael. Have you ever met Michael in person? What do you like about him? How did you guys become friends? Josh always has this thing where he talks about how our generation and the generation ahead of mine are digital immigrants. The younger generation are digital natives, right? So they've grown up with screens, they've grown up with computers, they've grown up with these sorts of relationships, and it's actually on us to understand what's going on with them. 2, set defined limits. If it's always arbitrary, you'll always be the bad guy. This is a big conversation that I have with a lot of parents. Now, if I just say to you, it's time to get off the screen, you're going to say, well, why? Why are you disrespecting me, says a parent. Why aren't you listening to me? What I really like, especially with the young men that I work with, oftentimes with ADHD, is setting defined limits so that they know the framework, right? If you say, you've got 2 hours that you can play today, or you can, I've got a young man who's really into doing flight simulations. You can do a 1 hour flight simulation. Fascinating, by the way. If you guys ever get a chance to read up on this or learn about it, highly recommend it. You've got a little bit of time to do this. Set a defined limit so that your child knows what the expectations are. Otherwise, what ends up happening is you set those limits for them, and then they're frustrated with you because they don't know what the rules are. If you have a predefined structure, then you can come back around and uphold that structure, and you're not the bad guy, but hey, we talked about this. We talked about the fact that we were only going to play for an hour today. What's going on? Help me understand. Point 3, reevaluate. Again, ever shifting new normal. We're trying to figure out what it looks like. I was talking to a parent last week. That parent's actually on this call, and he was saying that we need to start looking at this different, that it's less about how much screen time and more about what are you doing on the screen. You've got this period of time to play games. You've got this period of time to talk to friends. You've got this period of time, especially with COVID, we don't have the opportunity to go out and play till the lights go on. We don't have the opportunity to go kick the soccer ball around with friends. So if we're limiting the amount of time we have for our kids to be social, that also is a damaging entity. So we need to reevaluate, we need to have these conversations, and we need to loop back to setting defined limits. Next slide. Okay, brain development. So the brain actually develops from back to front. Think about it. When a baby is born, they know how to breathe. They know how to, their heart knows how to beat. All that stuff happens in the brain stem. The last part of the brain to develop is the prefrontal cortex. We'll talk about that next. So there are 3 stages of adolescence. Early adolescence is when, 10 to 14, when young men, and let's say when young people are developing the capacity to think intellectually, right? It's less about, I want, therefore gimme. It's more about helping someone to understand and discuss abstract thought, to discuss, the cause and effect, to really understand a little bit more about what's happening. There's a diminishment in egocentrism. I'm the center of the world. This happened to me, therefore it's the worst thing that happened. Middle adolescence, young men and women develop that ability to think outside the box, to plan differently, to really look at their lives less as cause and effect and more as what should I do to get what I want, which merges into late adolescence and delayed gratification. One of the things I hear a lot of parents dealing with is, well, why don't they just do it? I believe that, as parents and clinicians, what we need to do is we need to take external influences to build internal motivation, right? So brain development, your 11-year-old is not going to know when to get off the screen, right? They're not going to have the ability to sit there and say, I've played video games for 3 hours. I should probably stop doing this and do something a lot harder that I don't want to do because it's the right thing to do. I get all these parents who are saying, well, when I was a kid, I would help out all the time. Or when I was a kid, my parents would, well, why did they do that? We don't spank our kids anymore. Most of the time, we don't spank our kids anymore. Most of the time, we, our responses are a little bit softer. What also ends up happening is we're setting less boundaries. So we, it goes back to that thing we were saying before. We need to start setting those boundaries, especially early in adolescence, so that a young man or young woman can understand what the boundaries, what the structure, what the expectations are. You use external influences to build internal motivation. You have 2 hours on gaming, and then you're going to do something else. They don't want to do that, but that's okay. Reluctant compliance is still compliance. Next slide. Prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex is responsible for focusing attention, for predicting the consequences of actions, for impulse control, and for future planning. The prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until age 25. Some people may even say later. Jokingly, people will say that that men don't reach, the end of their adolescence till the late 20s, and there is some truth to that. The 12-year-old I work with and the 26-year-old that I work with are similar in a lot of ways, right? We have to teach those skills. One of the big things I hear with parents is they talk about knowing better. They talk about knowing better, right? Well, he should have known better. Why did he spray paint on the fence? Why did he go 109 miles an hour, which, is a real thing, right? He got a reckless driving ticket. Knowing better versus choosing better. So the prefrontal cortex, is developing, but, as we proceed later in life, those synapses are firing a little bit quicker. They're a little bit more developed. So in a quiet moment, we can choose better. In the heat of the moment, we don't always choose the right thing. So I want to differentiate knowing better versus choosing better. And what ends up happening is we can have a conversation about, lost my train of thought. We can have a conversation about, oh goodness. Well, we'll come back to that.
Knowing and choosing better.
Yes, knowing and choosing better. It's gone though, Joshy. I'm sure it was really poignant, y'all. I'm sure it would have changed your lives, but it's already gone.
And we know ADD because we have ADD.
Yeah, right. Well, that's our next slide. Is ADHD. Let's go ahead and move on. So video games and ADD. Why do they appeal? ADHD. Imagine sitting in class for 7-8 hours a day. You're sitting still, you're told to pay attention to someone else's thing, you're told to just absorb information, versus being able to engage actively. Video games are super fast paced. It appeals to the ADHD mind. There's an instant reward, instant gratification. You do that right, you move up a level. You learn some technique, it comes back around. The bright graphics are fantastic. Low risk. A lot of my clients with ADHD and learning differences are really struggling in school because it's an environment that's not set up for them. So there's a lot of shame involved in my clients with ADHD and learning differences. Low risk means failure is not public. If they fail to level up, it doesn't matter. They can start over again. If they fail to level up, no one's going to make fun of them and call them a loser or call them an idiot or say that you're too stupid to do algebra or something along those lines. Then there's the satisfaction of accomplishment. They have a satisfaction of accomplishment. They have worked hard and they actually did something great. They have a chance to try over and do over again. And there's less rules. I think that video games have a lot of negative connotations for a lot of people. I think people think, oh, you're wasting your life on video games. But think of the skills that are being taught, right? You're learning determination. You're learning focus. You're doing the same level over and over and over again until you get it. I think it's very easy to denigrate and say negative things about video games. And sure, there are issues with video games, but also at the same time, there's a lot that appeals to the ADHD mind. They're not sitting down in class for 8 hours a day. They're getting to direct their own lives. They're running as fast as they want. They have superhero powers. They can vanquish their enemies. There's a lot that appeals to it. Next slide. Moving on. Nancy.
That's me. Okay. I thought this was sort of interesting to think about requirements for becoming a parent, for doing this incredibly hard job of dealing with the people that Jacob just described. So, tongue in cheek here, requirements for parenting: an excellent sense of self, an encyclopedic knowledge of child and adolescent development, and nerves of steel. Now, it helps a lot if you were raised in a fully functioning family with loving parents and siblings. And, you know, for most of us, this description is just fantasy. So we learn about parenting as our children grow. Often we just stay one step ahead of them, and frequently we feel like we're running along behind, trying to understand them as we deal with our own lives. Next, please. So I wanted to talk a little bit about conflict resolution, just some things to keep in mind, because when you have children who are in the process of differentiation and separation, there's going to be conflict. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some ideas for being the parent of a gamer. Obviously, this one, pick your battles, ignore the small stuff, or let's decide which mountain is really important enough to die on. Acknowledge when your teen does what you want them to do, or even comes close. In other words, sometimes we're in the habit of just sort of assuming they're going to do what we want them to do, and we forget to acknowledge it. We forget to note it. Important as kids grow that they get more and more and more opportunities to have choice and control. Otherwise, we're telling them what to do all the time, and then we're upset with them that they're not doing it. So if, and then actually when conflict arises, it's important to be firm and calm. You know, volume doesn't increase the possibility that a parent is going to get hurt. As a matter of fact, it can just make things worse. And this is, of course, a parent issue. This is something that parents need to be mindful of, because if our kids push our buttons and we lose it, then we have more problems to deal with. We have whatever problem we just made, as well as whatever problem we're trying to deal with. Also think it's important to provide consistent expectations and be in mind consequences should fit the behavior or the misbehavior. Next, please. So here's some more ideas. Trying to avoid power struggles in the middle of a conflict. So child says one thing, parent says something else. Okay, two people with different opinions. Step one might be to try and understand your teen's emotions and thoughts. And it might look like, okay, I'll hear you out and I'll hear whatever you need to say about that. And then I want you to hear me out. So back to Stephen Covey in that wonderful book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. So that's an important thing to keep in mind with teens. And, you know, we're moving often from children where we can just tell them what they need to do to teens where we really have to negotiate and hear out and try and get them to see our points of view as well. So we're talking about problem solving and compromising, you know, something that, you know, is evolution as we raise our children. So even before trying to address the problem and solve a conflict, important to be calm and let your teen explain their perspective. Okay, I said that. Also explain your perspective calmly. And then maybe try and identify positive possible solutions to address the conflict. Maybe you pick one thing and try it, see if everybody can agree, evaluate what worked, and see what can be done to prevent further conflict. It may sound kind of easy as I'm writing it here, but you know, it's not a bit easy to do this. This is very hard work. And if you have a child who tends to push the limits, can require a lot of effort and energy on the part of the parent. One of the things that often brings parents into therapy is wanting to deal with their own issues. So they, one, don't pass them on to their kids, and two, don't end up making things harder as they go through their childbearing. Next, please. So updating your software, and talking specifically about games, it's important, I think, that parents sort of let go of the ideas they used to have about gaming and screen time. We are all having to work really hard at balancing. Parents have to kind of step it up to assist and model and discuss what they are doing with phones and screens and computers and games. It's important that parents be prepared to discuss staying safe online, including the risks of oversharing and contact with strangers. Both really important issues to be discussing with kids who are spending time online with or without games. And so let's say your kid does come to you with a sticky situation. Make the very first thing you say, I'm so glad that you came to me with this. I'm so glad we have a chance to talk about this. This is really important. Next, please. So our kids are growing up in a world that we could hardly imagine just even a few years ago. And they're not going to get it right immediately. They're learning, and we're learning too. So the kids will need to learn their own stopping points. I think Josh is going to talk about that a little bit later on. I think it's important that parents do talk to lots of people about these issues. Talk to other parents, talk to other people's kids, to experts, spouses, learn everything you can about it. And I think it's also really important that parents learn about the games their kids love. That means you want to read about it, watch a webinar, understand why your child really loves this particular game, get them to teach it to you. Wouldn't that be different and interesting? So probably the most important thing in all of this, I think a parent can say to themselves is, who is my child? What does he or she need? Those were questions I really wish my parents could have asked. I really tried hard to ask them with my kids. Not always easy, but it was important to be asking the question, because that sort of indicates that we're in our appropriate role as parents if we're asking, again, who is my child? What does he or she need? Next, Josh. Okay, you're up.
Hey, everybody. So, I am this kid that got to grow up and do something that he loves. I was that kid who, my parents left for a little bit and I would watch TV for 7 hours. And just like Jake was saying, like, I didn't know to turn it off. I was in it. And I was a kid who struggled to, sit still in class and be there. And what really saved me was athletics. I went from karate to swimming to basketball to soccer to lacrosse, and I would just pretty much exhaust myself until I could fall asleep at night. And as I got older, games were always a part of my life. When we got done with sports, we would get done and we'd be exhausted. It's not like we would be going out at night. We would come home and when I was younger, we played N64. We'd play, Mario Kart, Super Smash Bros. And it was always, we were always super competitive. And it was my first experience of games could be a community builder. And it was fun. It was fun. And half the time I wasn't even playing. I was watching, but I was in the same room as my friends as we're all talking smack and having a great time. So, as I said before, and for the people who are joining late, I kind of fused my two lives, my life as a athlete and my life as a video game marketer, to start this place called the Game Gym. And what I realized was there were no coaches for the world of games. Unfortunately, parents, a lot of them, unless you're a gamer yourself, you don't have the skills, necessary to help your kid learn about this world. And the kids, a lot of times, like Jake was saying, struggle to articulate, why they love these things, or maybe the parents aren't asking the questions like Mom said. So there's kind of these two parties that, they want to connect. Your kid wants to tell you about the game and you want to connect with your kid, but there's this disconnect. And so Game Gym offers, I think, an ability, and I call us, the esports conduit to the community. And whether it's through a summer camp, through a birthday, through our after school program, through a private lesson, we want to help people learn that video games can be a valid extracurricular activity when done with structure, when done with a group, when done with coaching. And, these these 4 photos that I included, I think are really important because Top left is one of our live broadcasts. This is an amazing moment that was captured, and this is a broadcast that we put on. So these kids aren't even playing the game; they're commenting or commentating, just like Joe Buck and Troy Aikman hop on, and they're doing the same thing. So there's so many opportunities in the world of gaming that have nothing to do with gaming. And I guarantee you that if your kid can get on a live stream and talk about a game for a period of time, it's going to help them with their public speaking, their ability to go into a classroom and give a presentation. The bottom left photo is one of the challenges that we do during camp. We have to build a tall structure with marshmallows and uncooked pasta, and the tallest structure at the end of 30 minutes wins. And what I don't tell them is that their first structure usually fails, and there is, most of the time, the marshmallows are too big, the weight is too much, so it falls, and you have to work with your team to kind of like figure it out. And that's why I give them 30 minutes instead of 10 minutes or 5 minutes. And then the last thing is fitness. Game Gym is we want to treat gaming holistically. And I think a lot of people think of this as, gamers are unhealthy, they have bad diets, and that is, true in a lot of cases. But if you want to treat games like sports, if you want to treat and be good at this and treat it like a valid extracurricular, you have to treat your body right. You have to fuel the machine well. So whether you're, playing a sport, video gaming, or studying for the SATs, you got to treat the machine that's doing those things the right way. And then the top right photo is a photo of our current location, the Game Gym. And the thing that you will see is you don't see a computer or a gaming system as you look through this entire place. Our whole vibe is games are a part of life. So we have a community center, but we also have classrooms. So you're able to go into a space and say, all right, I'm going to go work on this now, and then I'm going to come out and play more casually. So the Game Gym, to me, is one of the opportunities that's out there to help your kids and parents navigate this new space, and also to offer an ally, because I deal with parents all the time who struggle with this situation, and how do I get behind my kid? And the Game Gym is a resource for kids, parents, and our other underserved community is people who want to get into the video game industry. How do you climb the rungs of the ladder to find a career? So we work a lot with teens and people in their young 20s, and help them as they're getting their graphic design career going, or they're studying cybersecurity. They work at the Game Gym in the same way that, like, when I was swimming, I was a lifeguard at the pool and I worked the front desk, and it helped give me that sense of community. So I grew up in this area. I grew up in MCSL, which is the Montgomery County Swim League. And the reason why our area is so good at swimming, why we produce Olympian after Olympian, is that we have a fun, casual, but competitive entry point into this world in every single community in our county. There's a pool in every county. Every pool has a swim team, and that creates a sense of community around not just the neighborhood, but the team and the pool. And it brings people in. You want to be a part of that, and then people go on to these wonderful swimming careers. So my goal with the Game Gym was to take my knowledge of sports, everything that I've learned as being a swim coach and all that, and apply it to this world of video games that's desperately needing guidance. So one of the things that is really, really important about video games and how this is different is that video games are a business. They are very, very different than traditional sports. So, while I'm doing a lot of comparing, esports to traditional sports, we also have to acknowledge that there's some very, very core fundamental differences, and they'll help you as a parent navigate as your kid is interested in these things. So first off, video games are built by incredibly brilliant people. I worked for a number of video game companies, and we would literally, have the best, brightest minds in the industry sit around in a room and figure out how to keep people playing our games. They would, we build them in a cyclical fashion. So you level up, you grow, you have quests, they lead to new things. There's, all this new material that's popping out. And before, games used to be this thing that you would buy and play. They would be single player games. You'd go from start to finish, and then the game would end. Now, games like Fortnite, games like Candy Crush, games, all these other games, they're what's called games as a service. So it's no longer a one-stop shop at point A to point B. It's something that they're consistently doing new things, new marketing, new skins, new things for your kids to want. And as soon as your kid drops off, a marketing guy, and this is what I used to do, a marketing guy would come in and send you an email that says, hey, Timmy, you haven't played in 2 weeks. Like, come on back and you get this free loot box, or you get this other thing. And so like those things are built, with the goal of keeping you playing the game. They have tons of data on us. They know what the lifetime value of a customer is, what the lifetime value of a customer is based on how many games you play. So if I know that you play Fortnite for the first time, if I can get you to play 4 games or 5 games in that first session, your lifetime value of a customer goes up X%. So we build in hooks to make sure that you play those 5 games. There's all of these different things that incredibly smart people have built into the games. And now it's not even just thought, it's data-based. They're making data-driven decisions. And those are, that's huge. It's huge to understand the difference. And the goal is to keep you playing the game. Games are a business. That's the main thing. Like this is a money making, like they have to answer to their shareholders. That's the main thing. So how does that kind of, how do you as a parent, kind of knowing that this happens, help your kid navigate through this gaming experience? So let's talk about practice a little bit. As I said, esports are a little different. Think about comparing traditional sports to esports. Games are a business. The NBA is a business, but basketball itself is a game. Nobody owns the basketball. If Jake and I want to start a basketball league or a football league or a swimming league, nobody says we can or cannot do that. But with esports and video games, they control the basketball. They control who plays with it, how they play with it, like what levels, all of that information. So it's really, really important to know that like this thing is a business and their goal is to keep you playing the game. So say your kid is good at this thing and they want to get better. How do you like help your kid navigate this world? So say they're pretty good at this thing. They want to, they're like, maybe I'm not a great basketball player, but I'm a really great Fortnite player. How do you balance, giving your kid the ability to practice, giving your kid the ability, like Jake said, setting those goals 2 hours or whatever. But, how do you balance that with like everything that I've been taught from sports is you got to be the last guy in the gym. You got to put in 10,000 hours of training. Michael Jordan is a famous example of this. He is the greatest basketball player ever. And it's because the work that he put in. So say your kid is a soccer player and he's out there kicking the ball against the fence at 10 p.m. You're like, hey, great job, Timmy. Like, good job. Like, can I bring you a water, a lemonade? Like, awesome. But if your kid's playing Fortnite at 10 p.m., it's like, well, he's wasting his time. Well, chances are your kid's not going to go pro in soccer in the same way they're probably not going to go pro in gaming. But it can be a valid extracurricular if done with structure. So my goal and the Game Gym's goal is how do we help people who want to play casually and want to make this a part of their life, or they want to play competitively, but they just want to be the best of their friends, or they want to earn a scholarship to college, which is a very real thing now. If you go on ESPN, they have a running list of varsity esports programs that are available, and there's hundreds of universities on there that have varsity programs, college scholarships, and things like that. So, all right, how do I balance that as a parent? How do I know if my kid is casual? How do I know if they're competitive? How do I help them manage the transition from casual to competitive if they are interested in doing that? And how do we balance this whole thing? It's a really tough challenge, and the main thing that Mom and Jake really stressed, and I totally am big on this, is you have to ask, are you playing for fun? Are you playing to get better? Are you playing because there's a tournament coming up in 2 weeks, and you've got to work on your call outs and your communication with your team? You can help your kids set those proper goals. You can help them, if they're training, maybe you do give them a little bit more leeway. Maybe you do give them an extra hour. If they're, just messing around, maybe you do put up a harder line and say, hey, Timmy, that, it's been 2 hours. But you only know that if you're having that conversation with your kid. And if I want to be a Super Smash Brothers pro, or I want to be the best of my friends, those are two very different things. And that can only be known if you're having that conversation. So this is a graph that we created at Game Gym to help visualize some of the differences between esports and gaming and traditional sports. This is something that, as an athlete, I've worked on this graph, and I tried to make it as simple as possible, but I think it's really, really important to understand. So with physical sports, and I'm just going to use running as an example because it's very easy to understand, you have this arc that you go over. You warm up, you hit your peak, and then you start to fail, and then there's a hard stop at the end. And anybody who's run for an hour, at the end of that hour, your form is a lot different than it was in the middle and at the end. So for us, it changes a little bit. One of the things that's really interesting about sports is that this curve happens regardless of person. This happens to everybody, but like for Jake, maybe it's 2 hours. For Mom, maybe it's 4 hours. For me, it's 30 minutes. But this arc happens. So at the end of running, that hard stop is your legs are cramping, your lungs are burning, you're having really poor self-talk, your form is really poor, and imagine if you ran for 2 hours like that. It would be an incredibly negative experience. So now let's compare it to gaming. Gaming, you go through the same thing. You warm up, you hit your peak, and then you start to fail, but we don't get that hard stop because your brain is this muscle that can always be churning. So instead of cramping, instead of failing and lungs burning, now you can't hit those shots that you could hit an hour ago. Now you're a little bit more frustrated because dopamine receptors have been going off in your brain because the game is giving you all this reward, but the dopamine isn't hitting the same way it was an hour or two ago. And also in that moment, you have that poor self-talk. And so what I see a lot of times is this line in gaming gets extended. So this series is 3 hours, 2 hours. But unfortunately, you're not spending a majority of your time in the good part, in the warming up, in the peak. And any athlete, your goal is to extend that peak into a plateau. Any athlete has to be great, not just once, but over an extended period of time. Any race, you're not just running one, you're doing multiple heats over multiple days. When I was swimming, we would have prelims in the morning, we'd have finals in the afternoon, and it would be a 3-day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday meet. And I remember at the end of it, I was completely wiped. And gaming is the same way. So you go to these esports events, and there's multiple competitions that take place over multiple days. And the only way to be great for a long period of time is to be at that high point and make that peak a plateau. So one of the things that we see is I think kids game way too long. I think that what ends up happening is they don't get that realization. They're not getting that hard stop. And so they game and spend, if you're spending 3 hours gaming, you're spending only an hour or 45 minutes at your peak. And that's, not the best way to get better. Like I said before, imagine you run and then you run for 2 more hours. Your form would be really poor. Your stuff would be great. Your other things would be, really struggling, as you're trying to make it through these 2 hours. And that's kind of what happens in gaming. So when your kid is raging, when they throw the controller, that's because they're in they're in the back end and they didn't listen to their body and take that break. So one of the things that we have to do as game gym, and I think also as parents, is help your kid learn where that hard stop is, and that you should equip pretty much say that your legs cramping is the same thing as you can't hit those shots. Your lungs burning is you getting frustrated. And you got to take a break. You got to let your mind recover, relax. If I want to make my bicep bigger, you don't go and lift biceps every day. You go and lift biceps, then you go home, you rest, you eat, you refuel, you take a break, and then 2 days later you come back and you do biceps again. That's how you build up your muscle, and your brain is the muscle. So this is a really, really important thing. And I think visually it's so simple, but also really, really important for the world of gaming. And I hope that it helps you guys understand, as your kid is playing, if they're just messing around, that's one thing. But if I'm trying to work on something, it's not about, shooting 10,000 free throws in one day. It's about taking 1 hour and doing great free throws a number of days consistently. So the same things that apply to sports apply to esports and video games, but the signs of when you need to stop are less recognizable. So we have to teach our kids where these things are. So just like Mom and Jake said, you got to ask. You got to ask them what they know so that you can help them. Do they know that games are built to be addictive? Do they know that games are built to keep you playing? The more that you are empowered while you're gaming, the more you could take control of it. Why are you playing games? Are you playing it just for fun? Are you doing it to get better? Are you doing it because there's a competition in 2 weeks? Those are really important things to ask. Then you can inform them. You can fill in the gaps. Hey, well, just so you know, like dopamine gets released when something good happens, when you break, when you break through level 1. And then, when you break through level 2, dopamine is released, but less. Level 3, less. And so, when you go through gaming, the first level is going to be awesome, but the 7th level, you're just gonna be like, meh. And so you keep playing. But what your brain is telling you that you got to chill, you got to relax. More doesn't mean better. Just like I had said with the basketball analogy, you want to get good in free throws. It's about putting in a good work for a consistent amount of time, for over an extended period of time. It's not about shooting 10,000 free throws in a day. It's about shooting 100 good ones every day for 10 years. That's how you build up that plateau and get that brain to be, get that old man brain strength. And then the last thing is you need to support them. Like Mom and Jake said, you got to ask questions. You have to understand why they're doing it. If they're treating it like a sport, it's important, and it should be treated the same way soccer, basketball, swimming, gymnastics, all these other things are. Gymnastics and swimming, I think, are really great examples because they're both sports. And you tend to see this a lot with the Olympic sports, is that they could throw your life out of balance very easily. Gymnastics can lead to an eating disorder in the same way that it can lead to an Olympic gold medal. And esports and video games are along the same lines. You have to make sure that your kid is doing this right, and you have to be able to know what's going on and how they value it so that you can help guide them. Jake mentioned this at the beginning. Digital immigrants teaching digital natives is a really tough thing to do. But the more that you do it with them, the more that you will understand and can help guide them through this process. You have that fully developed frontal cortex that they don't have. So maybe you can help them understand things that they don't necessarily understand, or maybe understand but can't quite articulate. The other thing is just, I'm a firm believer in, I don't care if you don't like it. If your kid's into theater, you get into theater. If your kid's into tuba, you get into tuba. If your kid's into gaming, you get into gaming. And if you're not, then you're failing as a parent. Like, that's just straight up. So that is a thing that I see all the time, where parents are like, well, this is not really my thing. I don't want to do this. And it's like, well, you're not being a good parent. Every person is a totally able and capable of doing this. Learning how to game is the same thing as learning how to type or learning how to play the guitar. Your brain is telling your fingertips what to do, and you got to create those neural pathways, and it doesn't happen overnight. Think about how many times you typed "the brown fox jumped over the lazy dog" before you could not type without looking at your hands. It took a long time to do that. Give yourself the same leeway as you're learning how to game with your kid. Your fingers are not going to know where to go. It will be frustrating, but remember that arc. Give yourself the time. Give yourself 45 minutes. Give yourself an hour, because you're working on it. Like, games are puzzles. Games are, most of the time, they're how do I figure out how to get from point A to point B? How do I open up this gate? How do I do this? And that can only be done through working your brain. So, the more that you do it with your kid, the more that you can get into it with them and help guide them through that process. The last thing is that balance isn't perfect. I love this graphic, and I wish it was a GIF so you could actually see the swaying. But as this person walks across this tightrope, they're not perfectly still. They are constantly swaying from one side to the next. And so being in balance is kind of being consistently out of balance, but being able to check yourself as you swing from one side to the next. And I think that that's something that kids really struggle to do. I was that kid who watched TV for 7 hours. So we need help understanding that balance isn't perfect, and that you have to be compassionate as you help us understand that, because we're going to push those limits. We will watch TV for 7 hours. We will game all day if you let us. But it's also something that takes practice. So don't be frustrated with your kid if they are gaming too long. Help them understand that they're going to game better if they do it in shorter chunks, and then they help their brain kind of give it time to rest. And that, when you do have that time that your kid is out of balance, that it's more of a teaching moment than a punishment moment. So I'm going to hand it back to Jake, who's going to talk a little bit more about balance, because what happens if you fall out of balance? Like, what happens when your kid does watch TV for 7 hours? So I'll hand it off to Jake to talk a little bit more about what you do when balance becomes a little bit out of whack.
Yeah. Thanks, Josh. I want to agree with a couple of things you said. You use the tightrope. I use the pendulum swing. And our goal is to find the middle ground, right? Sometimes we'll go too far this way. Sometimes we'll go too far that way. And life is a constant process of attempting to establish equilibrium, right? And, also agreeing with what you're saying. I've done it as a clinician. A few months ago, I actually bought a Nintendo Switch. I had a number of clients who I was struggling to connect with and struggling to understand. And I got to be honest, playing Mario Kart and watching them kick my butt, and then also getting better at it and being able to hold my own, it's bonded me with some of my guys in a way that I've actually been really surprised with. Unlike my brother, I'm not a gamer at heart. It's not the way that I choose to spend my time. But I did for a little while where, my wife would call it training. So I'd be sitting down there, on the couch playing a video game, and she'd come down, she'd roll her eyes, and she'd say, "Are you training, honey?" And I say, "Yes, I am. I'm trying to get better at this." It was a way for me to bond with my young men. But balance and how to respond. So we talked about the prefrontal cortex. Can we expect our kids to set their own limits? No. Talked about it earlier, external influences to build internal motivation. If you expect your kid to do it on their own, you're setting yourself up for failure, right? We want to set limits, and we want to set boundaries. We want to front load. You can have that conversation. I work with a lot of kids who are transitioning and parents who are transitioning from wilderness therapy programs, residential treatment centers, therapeutic boarding schools, and coming home. And I think the most important part of that home transition is the home contract, right? Because when you're starting out, mom, dad, let me come home and I'll do anything, right? Mom, dad, let me get a, let me get a PlayStation and I will stop anytime you tell me, right? Mom, dad, let me get my driver's license and I'll drive anywhere you want me to. Eventually, that internal motivation ceases. And then it becomes a conversation of what sort of structure have you put in place? That consistency. The consistency is huge. I use the metaphor of dog training all the time. I'm not saying that your teenagers are dogs, but I am saying that the way you treat your dog and the way you treat your kid oftentimes are similar. If we have a dog that begs at the table, the dog begs at the table because occasionally that dog gets fed from the table, right? So I used to have a dog who, if I would say, go to your place, he would go, and he would walk to his bed and he would lie down in his bed and he might look a little sad, but he knew what the rule was. He wasn't anxious at the table. You never have a dog who's happily begging at the table, just saying, hey guys, this is super cool, not a problem, like no big deal. And what you often have is you have something entirely different. You have anxiety, you have that freaking out kind of thing. If we set the structure, then they won't be anxiously pushing the limits, right? If they know what the rules are, then they're not going to be sitting there saying, well, maybe I can get 5 more minutes, maybe I can get 5 more minutes. They might get that 5 minutes, but that's not going to be a good 5 minutes, kind of like what Josh was saying earlier. Let's move on to the next slide. And so I got a phone call just now and my whole screen just did something weird. But yeah, here we are. And responding to behavioral transgressions. So I'm now on my phone, guys, but that's okay because that's adaptation. Responding to behavioral transgressions, in order to have any chance of being effective, a consequence should be 3 things, right? We want it to be applicable, appropriate, and timely. Applicable. How? So one of the things that we always end up doing as parents that I hear all the time is like, well, he was up at midnight playing video games, even though we said, you can't. And I'll say, okay, well, what was his consequence? I took his cell phone away. Okay, well, what did that teach? I don't know. I did it. So we want them to practice the positive behavior. So if I have a client who gets pissed off and he runs upstairs and he slams the door every single time, and mom's like, I just want him to stop slamming the door. We might actually have, if you do that, here's the front loading, right? If you do that again, next time you will have to go up the stairs and gently shut the door 10 times to practice the positive behavior. Appropriate. Again, we want it to be along the same level of severity. If that kid, same example, wakes up at midnight and plays video games for 2 hours, do we want to take the PlayStation and throw it out the 3rd story window? Probably not, right? Remember that balance. They're gonna mess up. So we want them to have a consequence. Maybe it's, hey, you're not gonna be able to play the video game system for a week because I can't trust you. Or maybe it's gonna be, well, we can still play video games, but you're only gonna be able to play with me for the next week. Because then you get to learn, like Josh was saying, and you get the opportunity to supervise. Then timely. The further apart the cause and effect are, the weaker the association, especially with that underdeveloped prefrontal cortex, especially for those kids with ADHD. If you mess up and I tell you, well, you can't go to prom next year, doesn't really do much. That's a pretty severe consequence, but it doesn't have any applicability to what's happening right now. We want to keep it in line. So 2 things to keep in mind with that is intent. Now, we want to be restorative, look at justice as restorative justice rather than punitive, and emotional neutrality. It is perfectly fine as a parent to say, Johnny, we're going to have to talk about it later. There will be a consequence. What's the consequence going to be? I don't know, but I need to take a little bit of time to cool off. If you're not able to step out of there and cool off and relax, remember, kids are going to push your boundaries, right? So if you're upset, in my opinion, there's no shame in taking space. We want to teach the same thing to our kids. We want to teach them to take space. We want to teach them how to relax. We want to teach them how to come back to something at a neutral time. So, next slide. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. I learned a lot. This was wonderful. I think where I want to just direct people is back to that little phrase that I think is critical for parents to be asking of themselves a lot, and that is, who is my child? What does he or she need? If we can take a breath when we find ourselves stressed and not knowing what to do, that's a really great place to go back to, hang on to, and try and answer the question and make good decisions based on that. So just going over that one again, I think it's so important.
I like that. My final thought, change is inevitable. I use the metaphor of a river. We're perpetually moving downstream. And the world is changing, and we can stop and hang out in an eddy, but inevitably we carry on forward. While we can't change our direction and we can't change the way the world is moving towards screens and electronics and more interactive, we can insert structures and ideas and thoughts to protect ourselves and protect our kids. I think of the metaphor of the river, and we are all whitewater kayakers on that river. We can't change our direction, flip around and go upstream. It's just not possible. And if we're saying, I hate screens, I think it's stupid, you know, I don't like this, then we're trying to paddle upriver. It's exhausting, right? You're going down that river, and if you're a whitewater kayaker, if you do it well, it's flawless, it's executed perfectly, and you don't hit any rocks. If you do it poorly, you're gonna hit a rock. If you try and resist, you're gonna exhaust yourself. My best advice to you guys as parents, as clinicians, as everyone trying to figure this out, is to be a whitewater kayaker, figure out ways to move downstream, figure out ways to rest in those eddies. And if you do bang into a rock, if you do flip over, you have to learn that emotional Eskimo role. You have to be able to right your ship, get back up, and keep on moving down the river.
I like that emotional Eskimo role. That's well done. So, you know, for me, the thing that I just want people to know is, you know, esports and gaming, I think, you know, specifically esports, because that's my world of things. It's a valid extracurricular activity. It can teach you the same things that soccer and basketball and swimming can teach you. In no way, like, I'm not going to say, you know, it obviously it doesn't do the physical aspect. You still have to maintain that other side of things, but you can learn leadership skills. You can learn communication skills. You can learn how to be a good winner, how to be a good loser, how to work towards a goal. All of the things that we value sports for, you can learn through esports. And just like Jake was saying at the beginning, the friends that we make through these experiences are just as valid as the friendships that we make in real life. You know, I think that gaming is real life, and I think that if we treat it as such, it will be a much more, it'll be an easier time navigating that stream. The last thing too is that there are a ton of resources out there. I know a lot of parents feel lost, struggling. They don't know, you know, who to turn to. And you know, there are a bunch of resources out there. And my job and what Game Gym is we want to be a resource to our community. So maybe our programs aren't right for you or your kid, but if you want to know if this game is appropriate or not, or something like that, just a question, or have an ally in this world, come talk to us, because you know, you're not alone in this. It's a new world. So as you're kind of, giving validity to this thing, if you have questions, as you need help, as you guide your kid through that process, there are resources out there. And if we can't provide them for you, I definitely know the people who I can point you towards. So that is my final thought. And would love, when we open up, anybody who wants to come check out the game gym. We're located in the Randolph Hills Shopping Center. Over in Rockville, in between Rockville and Bethesda. So would love to have everybody open up or come when we open up again. So I'm going to toss it back to Olga for a little wrap up.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nancy, Josh, Jacob. That was amazing. So much good information. My kiddos are too young to game, but man, did I take so much in. I love the piece about really, even if it doesn't interest you as a parent, get into it, because I can relate to that on so many levels. And that's a really good reminder of what helps us be stronger parents, stronger members of the community, supporting our kids and growing with them, because we're just all continuing to grow and get through this together. So I appreciate all of your insight. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for Q&A. Please message me. You can message me privately. You can say the word question in the chat, and I'm just going to go in order and address everybody's questions. Sally did have the first question, and it was, can you offer additional consequences for not tolerating tech boundaries?
So I guess I'm assuming that's probably me, but Nancy, Josh, y'all feel free to jump in at any point. So I think it goes back to, I don't know your particular situation, but I'd be happy to chat with you, or I'd be happy to look at any of these situations. But applicability, appropriateness, and intent, and timeliness. Practicing the positive behavior. So if I don't know that you are respecting tech boundaries, then to a certain extent, you may have to observe technology. I have a client who habitually sped. So he lost he did not lose the ability to drive, but he lost the ability to drive without his parents knowing where he is. He has a speed tracking app on his phone. You may say, if I can't trust that you're going to do what you say you're going to do on the computer, then I'm going to watch remotely what you do on the computer. And the question would be, well, I don't know how to do that. Remember what Josh said. He's a good resource for those kinds of things. I'm sure, Josh, all kinds of apps and programs, and so that parents can set limits and set structures. I also think that it can be an opportunity for conversation. If you're not respecting my technological boundary, or if a kid's not respecting your technological boundary, the question might be why, right? The question might be, why are you not respecting the technological boundary? And then there's an opportunity for education. I'm not respecting it because I don't think that, I'm not respecting it because I want to play mature games and you say I can't. Well, then you and I are going to have to sit through this webinar on brain development and mature games and why it's a bad idea. So use it as an educational opportunity. Does that help?
Yep.
Okay. And Josh, Mom, do you guys have any suggestions on that?
I do. One of the things that I always found useful was getting young men in particular to sit with something and think about it, and perhaps write about it long enough for a message to sink in. So sometimes when kids, push the boundaries or do things they shouldn't do, it's useful to send them to write an essay about it and then have a discussion with a parent about it. So some of the things the child might find out are how video game companies try and make this into something that we want to do all the time. So that might be an example of a decent consequence.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. It's funny, Sally, your question actually reminded me what I blanked out about earlier. And we were talking about prefrontal cortex. We were talking about, the ability to know what they should do versus make the right decision. And the question becomes, what I was going to say is, we need to ask our kids not necessarily why, because here's the answer when you ask a 16-year-old why he drove 109 miles an hour. You know, like, I don't know why. Why is a really hard question for a lot of teenagers to answer. What can be a better question? What did you think the potential consequences would be? What did you think that your parents' response would be if that happened? So if we can direct our questions from why, because that prefrontal cortex, the ability to think abstractly, the ability to say, well, why did I do that? Well, I guess there's a piece of me that really feels a need to step out. No, they can't do that. But what would happen? So to make that cause and effects correlation. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to do that over.
One thing I wanted to jump in there too is that the punishment has to fit how your kid games. If a lot of times, with sports, our kid, like regardless of what happens, those kids are playing in the football game on Friday night. They could fail all their classes, but parents will still let their kids play because sports are important. When your kid is treating this like a more serious thing, or they're trying to get better at it, there may need to be punishments that are outside of the game. Because if I treat this like a sport and you're taking this away from me, there's a disconnect there. And I think that that's why that conversation about like, are you playing for fun? Are you trying to enter a tournament? What are you doing with this thing is really important, because we let our kids do all kinds of things and still play sports because we understand the value. So if your kid is taking this more as the serious thing, maybe the punishment is something outside of game. Maybe you got to do, the lawn or something like that, because this thing is really, really important, and removing them from that actually hinders their performance. So, again, it's all about the conversation, because I think that, if I'm a kid and I love this thing, and I know if I do anything wrong, the first thing that's going to happen is my gaming console gets taken away. I'm probably going to be a little bit less honest with you about certain things because I know that that's going to happen. So I think, the taking the gaming stuff away as the first thing that happens, I think is sometimes could be a troubling thing and set a bad precedent, especially if somebody is taking this more seriously.
Yeah, Josh, that's interesting what you said, and I appreciate that reframe, especially, are we looking at it as playtime or practice? Some of the things I tell parents is two things I don't ever want to use as punishment are food or exercise. If you create a negative association with food, that's a really bad idea. We don't want to restrict food, or any of those concepts. The same thing with exercise. If you do this, you're not going to be allowed to go to the gym is bad, because the gym is a release. And here, it's a release, and it's an opportunity for structure, and it's an opportunity for self-discipline. You're saying the same thing about esports, and it creates a shift. So then, how do we come up with something that is an applicable consequence, right? It's still applicable to the game. You misuse the games. Maybe you have them doing a part of the game that they dislike more, right? I don't know, dude. Maybe, and we're all just trying to reinvent the wheel. I tell parents, sit down with your husband or your wife, or someone you care about, over a cup of coffee or however you do it, and think of ways that you can respond.
Sometimes it's useful also to have kids come up with 3 possible consequences for their behavior that has to be repaired, and ask them, why they think those things would assist them in not making that mistake again.
I like that.
Great answers. Thank you. All right, next question is from Sean, who's also a fellow gamer. And he can easily imagine that many gamers, especially those who play competitively online, have dealt with extreme toxicity from other players, including abuse, cyberbullying, racism, and so forth. Is this something you address with the kids? How do you approach this topic? How do kids typically cope? It's a good question.
We absolutely do. We do a number of things. So we kind of tackle it from 2 different points of view. one point of view is the kid. They need a resource and they need a trusted source to be able to go to when they have those experiences. And they already know that you're terrified as a parent of this whole situation. So, you got to create that open dialogue so they feel comfortable going to you about, anything that may happen. If I think that my games are going to be taken away because, you see something obscene, well, we should take all screens away because, you can turn on TV and see horrible things, today at literally any time of the day. So, we talk with our kids about one, we do information safety, technology, gaming addiction. We teach all our kids all the things that I've talked to you guys about. In terms of cyberbullying, in terms of all those things, we also teach them that there's all these tools. You can turn off chat. You can't make people not horrible, but you can not listen to them. You can mute people. You can do that. And if you don't know how to do those things, you got to be able to navigate. And again, if you're the parent and you don't know how to do those things, it's going to be hard for you to set those controls for them. We can also help you navigate those kinds of things. So if you don't know, come ask me and I can help you, teach your kid how to turn chat off and things like that. We're not going to be able to avoid horrible people out there saying horrible things, but we can help people understand that there's just trolls out there who want to start issues, and that you have these tools to either mute them, block them, maybe you sign off yourself, maybe you start a new game. So there's all these kinds of different avenues that we teach our kids to kind of combat these things. The other thing we do is we empower them to be those people who, if they see something like that in game, a lot of times nobody says anything. If I see something in game, I'm always like, dude, nope, like absolutely not. And like, with Fortnite, like, look, you could pop out of a game and pop into another game in 30 seconds. I was on a game with somebody who, had an obscene tag, and I was just like, absolutely not, like, this is horrible. And then I left. And, we have to speak up. You have to tell people that is not okay. So we are empowering our kids to do that. And we're saying, look, you may even get backlash when that happens, but you're still doing the right thing. And that's what's important. So we talk to our kids about all these things. We teach them the tools, we empower them, and we give them support. And that's the other part. There are no coaches in the world of esports before Game Jam came along. So we do a really, I think we do a really great job, and we actually have one coming up this weekend. We do a 2-day, almost 12-hour training for our coaches to help them. They know the game. We're helping them be better educators. We're helping them learn how to manage classrooms. We're helping them learn how to set goals. We're helping them how to help a kid deal with a bully. And those are things that our industry is very, very much missing. And part of the reason we have so many issues is we've gone the last 20 years of literally the whole industry being unsupervised. As every kid has gone into this world, unless they have an older brother, older parent or sister who games, they are figuring it out for themselves. And we don't let our kids do that with any other thing. So, there's a ton of issues with how kids are learning, that they can't necessarily trust their parents all the time to act rationally and responsibly when they bring them something, because that dialogue is not created, and they don't have another resource to go to. So, what we do is, like I said, we target both things. Or actually all three. We teach the kids and empower them. We teach and empower the coaches, and we teach and empower the parents. And those are the three underserved demographics in gaming. And I think that, the more that we could do that, and provide those mentors for our kids, the more opportunities, or the less bullying we will see, and things like that. In this world of gaming.
Anybody want to add to that?
I'm kind of intrigued at your statement, Josh, that it's been 20 years of lack of supervision that has gotten us to this place, and so important to work on cleaning this up. Good.
Yeah. Imagine if we taught football by doing what we do now with gaming, which is kids watching YouTube videos. And we said, all right, now like you've seen football, right? Like go out and like do that. They don't know how to hit. They don't know how to run plays. They don't know. They'd kill each other. And that's literally what's happening in video games. And then there's nobody to be able to be like, hey, Timmy, like not cool or whatever. There's no coach to help manage that all those egos, all that, adolescent ADD, all those, I mean, I felt like, exposed nerve when I was younger. I was reacting to all kinds of things. And my coaches helped not only guide me as an athlete, but as a person, because if I came in a bad mood, they were like, Josh, what's up, man? How's life going? And I was able to talk about that. But say I have a bad day and I just go straight into the game, I'm going to take my anger out on that in the set. And so you don't have that mentor to be like, hey, let's talk about, what's going on with you, man? Like, what family at home? Is it this? You're getting bullied? There is no resource to go to. So it's a huge thing and something that, I think that, our world's going to be a lot better when we have a game gym in every community.
We have one more question, guys. I want to make sure we get to it. I know it's already 1:30, so I am going to give you 2 minutes to answer it to respect everybody's time. Kathleen asked, they accept screen time, but what are your recommendations for remote learning when games in school are on the same PC? Work before play doesn't work.
I'll start out. Work before play doesn't work. Yes and no. Dessert before dinner also doesn't work. Keeping it to 2 minutes. I do believe that structure is really difficult to teach at first, but it's through the hard work at first that easy choices, hard life, hard choices, easy life. You may have to do more time supervising, watching, providing structure so that they learn the structure and giving consequences when it doesn't happen. You're right. It's on the same PC. Josh, you could probably help with controls to know, what a young man or young woman is doing. Are they on Blackboard or Sakai, or are they on Discord or YouTube? And differentiating between the two and setting up those structures. It's going to take more work because they don't want to do it the hard way.
And a younger child is going to certainly need more scaffolding than an older one, at least we hope. Josh, what do you think?
Look, it's a challenge and we deal with it. So Game Gym is running all of our programs that we used to run live online. We're running an after school program from 4 to 6 that we run through Zoom and an application called Discord, which is kind of like Skype for gamers. And we're also running full weeks of camp, Monday through Friday, 11 to 4. And there is an element of, I can't make Timmy pay attention in the same way I could when he was in the classroom. That is a huge challenge. And so the only thing that we could do, and because I'm not in the room with them, you're in the room with them, is to be a part of that experience more. You're if you're in there, doing work while your kid's on with school or things like that, you could be a part of that experience. I think that, I caution a little bit of like putting in like the screen watching applications and those things like that. I think they can be valuable and things like that. But, as an adolescent, your computer, your phone is your life. It's your like access, and it's kind of like your diary in a way. And it's, having somebody read that is I think a little bit intrusive sometimes, but I think you also earn that ability. So you have to be trustworthy to be able to do that. But I think that, look, there's an element of, we have to acknowledge that the lines are blurring, that screen time is both educational and play. And it's a challenge. I don't have a perfect answer for like how you could keep your kid in the classroom while, and not pull up a second screen and be on Twitter. That's something that only you and the person in the room can be. The other thing I will say is that we do our best to try to make our content as engaging as possible. And I think a lot of people are failing in the online schooling, and it's just not that interesting. And so, I mean, I think that you have to be better. We have to do more. We have to engage with our kids on this platform. And I think, a lot of people doing it, this is super new to them. So as we learn more about this platform and how it works, I think we'll have better tools for that. But right now, those lines are blurred, and it is a challenge. So I think at this point, the best thing that you could do is, be a part of things more. And that can help you then be able to know, hey, my kid is doing this or doing that. Not looking over their shoulder, but, checking in, being in the same room. Like, I set up my laptop next to your gaming computer, and, we're both doing work together. And then afterwards, we're both playing together. And those are things that I think you have some opportunities to do. But I also 100% acknowledge that this is a new challenge that we are even struggling to work to do. So do the best you can, and I think that
it's a brave new world.
Yeah, ever shifting new normal, to bring it back to the title of this. So ask people, do some research, Google, see what's out there, and I'll do the same. And we'll try to be a better resource, because that is a really great question.
Thank you. Thanks, Nancy, Josh, Jacob. Thank you so much again for all this wonderful information. Thank you for the participants who joined today and asked questions. I will follow up with this, the recording from this. You guys can send me the PowerPoint. I'll share it with everybody. Game Gym is offering a discount for their summer camp program, so I will include that for you guys, and the contact information, so that way you have all of that too.
Thank you, Olga. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Josh.
you. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you, guys.
Stay well, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.